My name is Alex. 2.5 years ago, I slept on cardboard outside a shopping mall in Miami. It wasn't a beautiful fall from grace story. No bankruptcy, drugs, or tragedy. I just gave up. After my divorce, I lost my programming job, moved out of my apartment, first lived with friends, then in my car, then they repossessed the car for debt. I remember that evening in September 2023. I was 34. I sat with empty pockets, my phone dead, thinking, this is it. This is my life now. The mall security guard, a Latino man around 50, brought me coffee every night. Miguel. He didn't pity me, didn't lecture. Just said, hey amigo, hang in there. One day he told me he was homeless himself 20 years ago, after fleeing Venezuela with $30 in his pocket. See this security uniform? He said. For me, this is a winner's suit. One morning I found a discarded iPad with a cracked screen by a dumpster. Charged it at McDonald's. It worked. I had two options. Sell it for $50 and buy food for a week, or try something crazy. I chose crazy. At the library, I connected to Wi-Fi and started looking for freelance gigs. Simple ones. Fix a website bug for $20. Set up WordPress for $30. But there was a problem. You needed an address to register on platforms. I used the library's address. The librarian, an elderly woman named Dorothy, noticed and said nothing. She just nodded to me every day and left cookies on my table. The first order came after 4 days. Some startup from Australia. $25 for half an hour of work. I cried right there in the library. Dorothy came over, put her hand on my shoulder and said, I knew you weren't just sitting here 10 hours a day for nothing. In the first month, I made $340. Rented a room in a dorm for $400. They lent me the missing $60. First time in 6 months, I slept in a bed. Miguel came to visit, brought pizza, said, I knew you'd make it out. But something unexpected happened. On the third week of work, a guy around 25 approached me in the library, saw me coding on the broken iPad and asked, are you a programmer? Turned out his name was Jake, a Stanford student who came to Florida for vacation to visit his parents. We talked for 4 hours. He asked, why aren't you in Silicon Valley? I told him everything. He silently wrote down my email and left. A week later, I got an email. Hi Alex, told my professor about you. He wants to talk. It was a computer science professor from Stanford, an AI specialist. We did a Zoom call. He offered me free remote access to his lectures. You know, he said, talent doesn't depend on your address. The next 6 months I worked like crazy, 12 to 16 hours a day. Freelance platforms, Upwork, Fiverr, everything. Plus evenings watching Stanford lectures. I spent nothing. Ramen for $1, tap water, 1 pair of jeans. Saved every cent. By March 2024, I had $8,000 in my account. But then disaster struck. I got kicked out of my room. The owner sold the house. Back on the streets. I sat on the sidewalk with my backpack thinking, here we go again? I called Miguel. He said, come to my place. He lived in a tiny studio. Gave me his couch for 2 months. His wife Maria cooked me dinner every evening. They didn't take a cent. Family, Maria said, isn't always by blood. Then I made my bet. Found a startup that needed a CTO, Chief Technology Officer, but couldn't pay salary. Offered to work for equity 15%. They were building an AI tool for small businesses. Nothing revolutionary, but I saw potential. The knowledge from Stanford lectures came in handy. I understood the technology better than the founders. For 3 months, I slept 4 hours a night. Wrote the entire back end from scratch. Brought in the first 100 customers through cold calls. The founders, 2 brothers from Boston, were initially skeptical. Homeless 100, they joked. But when I solved in a week a problem they'd been struggling with for 6 months, one of them said, dude, are you a genius or what? I answered, I just didn't have the right to make mistakes. June 2024. A venture capital fund noticed us. Investment round $2 million. My 15% share suddenly became real. But I didn't sell. I waited. At the investor presentation they asked, Who's your 100? The brothers hesitated. I stepped forward in my only pair of jeans and $5 t-shirt. Said, me. One investor smirked. Are you serious? I opened my laptop and in 15 minutes dissected their code to atoms, showed 3 critical vulnerabilities and proposed solutions. Silence. Then the lead investor said, we're giving you the money. After the meeting, he approached me. I grew up in a trailer in Texas. I know hunger in the eyes. You have it. Don't lose it. The company grew like wildfire. By September, 10,000 paying customers. By December, 50,000. But in October, everything almost collapsed. Our main competitor, a huge corporation, tried to crush us. Price dumping, aggressive marketing. One of the founder brothers panicked. That's it. Game over. Let's sell while we can. I said, no. We have something they don't, we're hungry. I made an insane move. Open-sourced part of the code. The developer community exploded. In 1 month, we got 1,000 free improvements from programmers worldwide. Competitors couldn't keep up. It was a risk that could have killed the company. But it worked. The brothers looked at me like I was crazy. But one later admitted, only someone who lost everything could risk like that. January 2025. A tech giant bought us. Deal amount, $47 million. My share, $7,050,000. After taxes, about $4.2 million remained. I stood in Miguel's apartment, which he'd given me for those months, staring at the numbers on the screen. Couldn't believe it. Called Miguel. He was still working as a guard. Said, come over. I drove to the mall. We sat on the same bench where he'd given me coffee 2 years ago. Miguel, I said, quit your job. I'll pay your pension for life. He cried. Then said, you know what's strangest? I never doubted you. I saw how you looked at the world. In your eyes, there wasn't hopelessness. There was a pause. I'll remember his words forever. I called Dorothy from the library. She was 68, living on a librarian's pension, $1,200 a month. Her house needed repairs. The roof was leaking. I transferred $50,000 and said, for repairs and for cookies for others who'll sit in the library for 10 hours. She cried on the phone. Then said, Alex, I know dozens like you, but only a few make it out. You know the difference? They didn't become bitter. You didn't become bitter. It was true. I could have hated the world. But Miguel, Dorothy, Maria, the Stanford professor, even that Australian guy who gave me my first order, they didn't let me become bitter. To Jake, the student who introduced me to the professor, I paid for his last year at Stanford $60,000. He wrote, this is too much. I replied, you changed the trajectory of my life in a 4-hour conversation. That's priceless. To the Stanford professor, I donated $200,000 for scholarships for students from poor families. He named it Alex's Second Chance Scholarship. I said, no, call it Miguel's Scholarship. He gave me my first second chance. Money is strange. When you don't have it, you think about it constantly. When you do, emptiness. I didn't want a yacht or Lamborghini. I wanted quiet. Found a small island in Belize. 2.5 acres. Palm trees, white sand, crystal water. Price, $850,000. Bought it without thinking. But the real estate agent said, are you sure? There's no electricity, water, internet. Civilization is an hour away by boat. I smiled. I lived on cardboard. This is an upgrade. But not for show. Built a simple house there. Solar panels, rainwater collection, satellite internet. The first night on the island, I lay in a hammock under the stars thinking about that cardboard by the mall. The distance between them, 2 years and infinity. I lived there half the year. The rest of the time traveling and helping others. Created a fund for homeless programmers. We provide laptops, internet, training, even temporary housing. In 1 year, we helped 200 people return to the profession. 67 of them already found work. One guy, Marcus, was homeless for 5 years. Alcoholic, lost his family. Through our fund, he went through rehab, learned Python, got hired as a junior developer for $65,000 a year. Called me in tears. I hadn't spoken to my daughter in 3 years. Today she agreed to meet. That's what money is for. Miguel now runs this fund, gets $80,000 a year and loves it. He knows every program participant by name, brings them coffee, like he once did for me. He says, "I'm not a CEO. I'm a professional friend. On the island I have a guest house. Miguel and Maria come for a month every winter. We sit on the porch, drink coffee and watch the ocean." Maria once said, "Alex, you know what changed? Your eyes. Before there was fear in them. Now peace." I replied, "Not peace, gratitude." People ask, "How did you do it?" Honest answer, I got lucky. I found an iPad, got on the right project, met the right people at the right time. But here's what I learned in these 2 years. Luck comes to those who don't give up. When I slept on cardboard, I had 2 paths. Give up completely or try one more time. I tried. Not because I was strong. Because Miguel brought me coffee. Because the library had free Wi-Fi. Because one Australian guy risked giving me an order. Because Dorothy left cookies. Because Jake didn't walk past. Because a professor believed in a homeless person. Because Maria fed a stranger. Recently, I returned to Miami. Came to that mall. The cardboard is gone, thrown out long ago. But I remember the spot to the centimeter. Stood there for half an hour. A young couple walked by, looked at me strangely. "What's this guy doing? Staring at the pavement?" I smiled. They don't know that this square meter of concrete is the most important place in my life. Here I died. And here I was born again. Right now I'm writing this from the porch of my house on the island. Waves crashing. Pelicans flying. Just got off the phone with Jake. He finished Stanford, launching his own startup. Asked for advice. Marcus sent a photo hugging his 12-year-old daughter, together for the first time in 5 years. Miguel texted, "Another guy from the fund found work. Will you come to the opening?" And in my pocket, there's always a photo of that cardboard. Printed, laminated. To remember, not about poverty. About people. About Miguel with coffee. About Dorothy with cookies. About Maria with dinner. About how a second chance isn't something you take. It's something you're given. And my job now is to give it to others. Again and again. As long as I have strength. As long as there's coffee.